The state's been on a killing spree. After a 2-year hiatus, there have been at least 11 executions, all of them for drug-related offenses.
He was taken away, he was hanged. That shattered me.
Our state decisively and persistently murders people.
In Singapore, a string of executions ignites rare protests and spirited debate over the country's zero-tolerance drug policy.
More Singaporean families and individuals will be harmed if we remove the death penalty.
Does Singapore really want to be known as this country that get rid of people so easily?
You want to traffic drugs, there are rules involved. If you get caught with a set amount of drugs, you get hanged.
No more blood on our hands!
Should Singapore heed calls to rethink its drug laws? 101 East investigates. His name was Nazri bin Lajim. His son Haikal remembers him as a loving father.
I just want to believe that he's still alive. I think it's not fair for me, but I think it's just a law. I can't do that, I can't change anything.
Nazri was hanged last year for trafficking heroin in his home country of Singapore in 2012. He was 64 years old. His sister Nazira is still in mourning.
My brother has been taken from me very cruelly. And I know now he's gone, I miss him so much.
For Nazira, these pictures of her brother, taken just days before his death, are both a source of comfort and pain.
When I see his photo, I feel the pain and I felt so hurt.
The photo shoot is a privilege, granted only to inmates about to face the gallows. Nazri is smiling here, but Nazira says his final days were difficult ones. They were only informed about the impending execution 1 week in advance. A last-minute appeal failed. Judges also turned down his request for more time to say goodbye to his family.
There's no sympathy at all, no mercy at all. My brother is a sick man, addicted to drugs at the age of 14. Without that drugs, he cannot control his life. And yet, he's being hanged.
Nazri had been caught with more than 35 grams of pure heroin. Singapore's drug laws are among the toughest in the world. Anyone who possesses more than a certain amount of illegal drugs, such as heroin, cocaine and cannabis, is presumed to be trafficking. And if the quantity of drugs is above a prescribed threshold, the judge has to impose the mandatory death penalty.
The burden to prove has been shifted to the accused person when he is in possession of the drugs. So therefore, it is a violation of the presumption of innocence, where the prosecution has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, but the accused is now supposed to prove to the contrary.
Human rights lawyer M. Ravi once represented Nazri, as well as many of the inmates who are now on death row.
Most of the drug traffickers are drug mules. Just look at their profile. They are very poor, they are stuck in a structural poverty. We also have a high proportion of ethnic minorities being overrepresented.
1, 2, 3. Abolish the death penalty!
Singapore has a small but vocal community of anti-death penalty activists.
Because people are just scared. Even I'm scared.
But campaigner Kokila Anamale says more people are joining their cause.
People have been reacting to this violent spree of executions. This is after a 2-year hiatus where we didn't have any executions. It definitely caught a lot of attention because the first one was of Nagin, who was an intellectually disabled man, and that struck a chord with a lot of people.
Nagendran K. Dharmalingam was hanged in April 2022 for trafficking 42.7 grams of pure heroin. He had an IQ of 69, a level suggesting intellectual disability. But judges ruled that he knew what he was doing. Weeks before Nagendran's execution, hundreds of people gathered for a rare protest in Singapore.
We just begged her to grant him clemency.
His case drew global attention, including that of British billionaire Richard Branson and of actor and author Stephen Fry, who appeared in this video.
Please grant Nagendran Dharmalingam clemency.
You were his lawyer?
Yes.
Lawyer M. Ravi remembers his first meeting with Nagendran.
It was like speaking to a child. I was asking him the first question, Nagendran, do you understand that you are going to be executed? He said he's in a garden and someone is appearing and talking to him, and don't worry about death. It's like he doesn't even understand he's going to die.
It's common whenever people are accused of crimes to feign ignorance, to demonstrate a lower level of awareness, and maybe not be as smart as they really are.
Adrian Tan is a senior lawyer with a large following on social media. His posts on the death penalty have generated heated debate. He's also head of Singapore's Law Society, but he is speaking to us today in his personal capacity.
In Nagendran's case, the psychologist hired by him said that he did know what he was doing, and that's really the legal test. Because otherwise, we'll start measuring each other's IQs and we'll start seeing what line we should draw. If someone is 100, are they more culpable? What if someone's IQ is 70 and Nagendran's is 69? Where do we draw the line?
On the eve of Nagendran's execution, his mother, Panchalai Supamaniam, pleaded for mercy in a last-minute appeal before the Singapore court. M. Ravi was on medical leave and could not represent her son.
And I had to tell her that, that I'm unwell, and they have given me a medical certificate and they don't want to wait.
Because of Nagen's intellectual disability, he wasn't able to do it. So his mother filed an application on his behalf. She doesn't speak English. She has very low education. She was extremely intimidated in court, and that was the evening before his scheduled execution, where she had to stand up in court and fight for her son's life and begged the court to spare his life.
Nagendran was hanged the following morning. At his hometown in Malaysia, hundreds of mourners gathered to say goodbye and lend support to his mother. Her appeal drew a sharp response from Singapore's Attorney General's chambers. In a media statement, it described the application as an attempt to abuse the court's processes and unjustifiably delay the carrying into effect of the lawful sentence imposed on Nagendran.
Okay, thank you.
It's Friday night in the Malaysian capital, Kuala Lumpur, and sisters Shankri and Angelia Pranthaman have a bus to catch. It's an overnight journey they've made regularly for the past 8 years. 6 hours to neighbouring Singapore for a 1-hour visit with their brother Pania.
We are working on Fridays, so the visit is tomorrow morning 9 a.m. So after work, it's immediately traveling on the 9th and then returning the next day. So it is tiring and exhausted.
Pania Selvan Pranthaman was convicted in 2017 of trafficking 51.84 grams of pure heroin into Singapore and is now on death row. Shankri says he'd been tricked by an acquaintance he barely knew.
He told Panir that the content of this parcel is illegal medicine. It's illegal medicine, it's a sex medicine. So Panir, he trusted blindly trusted this person, and he brought the parcel inside.
But the trial judge found that Panir's evidence was inconsistent and handed him the mandatory death penalty. He's now awaiting the outcome of his latest appeal.
Yes, Panir did mistake, but he should get reasonable punishment for his mistake, but not taking his life.
For a time, the sisters held out hope that Panir would be resentenced to life imprisonment. Under Singapore law, convicted drug traffickers can avoid the death penalty if they show that they were only couriers, and if the public prosecutor certifies that they've substantively assisted authorities in disrupting drug trafficking activities. Shankri says Panir cooperated as best he could, but it wasn't enough.
Because the recruiter will not provide correct and more information to the mules. They know for sure that these mules will be arrested later on. If you provide them with the information, definitely to save themselves, they will pass those information to the authorities.
Shankri and Angelia have arrived in Singapore. They grab a quick breakfast. And then there's another bus to catch. They have to be at the prison before 9.
I just prepared for him to give this book and also some letters.
You always bring him things? You always bring something for him every week?
Yeah, last week my sister brought this very thick book.
Yeah. Okay. We gave him this book.
Oh, it's a nice big book.
Yeah, it's thick, this much, this thick.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So I still keep the receipt that we bought all the books and all, so that we hope one day Panir will come back and see how much we only spend on his books. People will laugh at us and ask us to prepare for the worst. So we was trying to be positive and to talk positively, so that even probably God will change his mind, probably, and save Panir.
Singapore is one of Asia's most livable cities. Crime rates are among the lowest in the world. But it wasn't always like this.
In the 70s, we faced a huge drug problem. Families were being broken up because of addiction. The people took a decision to be harsh on drugs. People who bring drugs into Singapore, we will send them a clear message. The message is not just a possible death penalty, but a mandatory death penalty.
Singapore's government says the message has been effective. It recently released the results of a survey involving respondents from 6 unnamed regional cities. 83% believed the death penalty deterred people from trafficking substantial amounts of drugs into Singapore.
So who are the people who are trading in amounts that are above the capital threshold? People who have less knowledge, less information, and less resources. Often they're either drug users or they're people who are in precarious positions for other reasons.
Bruce Matthew is a Singaporean and a recovering heroin addict who has been to prison 5 times, but not for drug trafficking.
So for those people who advocate that capital punishment is useless, it doesn't deter drug trafficking. Guess what? It deterred me. And it deterred a lot of people that I know personally from trafficking drugs. Especially in my 40s, there was one stage I was so tempted, I tell you, so tempted to traffic drugs. I was so broke. Two things held me back. One, the death penalty. Okay. The second reason, my daughter. The last time I was sentenced, not only was I married, I had a daughter who was back then 3 years and 1 month old.
Bruce has been clean for 7 years and now spends much of his time sharing an anti-drug message with young people. He's also found new appreciation for Singapore's tough laws.
My daughter can walk out in the middle of the night, cross the street to 7-Eleven to buy something, and I won't even bat an eyelid because I know she will come back safe and sound. If you want to do away with strict laws, something has got to give, you know. And I am not about to give the safety of my society just because someone don't want to be hanged for trafficking drugs. No, 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 no. This is not a good exchange.
The government says the majority of Singapore residents hold similar views. According to a survey conducted by the Ministry of Home Affairs, 65.6% agree or strongly agree that the mandatory death penalty is an appropriate punishment for trafficking a significant amount of drugs. But anti-death penalty campaigners point to a different survey on the same issue.
A survey done by the National University of Singapore a few years ago in consultation with a renowned criminologist, Professor Roger Hood, shows that when it comes to drug trafficking cases, when given the correct information and background circumstances in which these accused persons commit the crime, a large majority of the respondents are opposed to the death penalty. So the state doing its own surveys to justify its own arguments is strange.
Drug traffickers we see as people who are making money by destroying your lives.
Singapore's Law and Home Affairs Minister K. Shanmugam has been on various platforms explaining his government's position.
Are these deterrents effective when the individuals who succumb to or end up being the traffickers, right? More often than not, they are from the lower income groups.
If I were to say in Singapore, if you are poor and desperate, then we won't impose the death penalty. Anybody else? Yes, death penalty. But if you are poor and desperate, no death penalty. What do you think will happen? Everyone who comes in will say he's poor and desperate, right?
We have to be tough on drugs, but the complete picture...
In Parliament, Shanmugam drew a distinction between drug traffickers and drug abusers.
We are tough on those that we need to be tough on. That's the drug traffickers. But, for example, drug abusers, we try to not even treat them as criminals. We instead treat their drug dependency through a variety of means.
Most of the people I know are still relapsing. So
the Singapore government and its main drug enforcement agency, the Central Narcotics Bureau, or CNB, declined our requests for interviews.
Did you consider yourself an addict?
So to better understand the state's rehabilitation program, we spoke to people who have experienced it. Those who agreed to be filmed asked that we disguise their identity. Dee was still a teenager when she tested positive for ecstasy following a police raid. She spent 6 months at the Drug Rehabilitation Centre, or DRC.
I was not an addict. I was a 19-year-old girl who had some serious problems and liked to distract herself. The whole experience was really dehumanizing. We were given these numbers and never referred to by our human names.
When I got into DRC, it's the biggest shock of my life. The living condition, the treatment of inmates,
JY has been to DRC multiple times.
This incarceration of 6 months, what they do is basically just to lock you up, feed you, and maybe let you attend some courses.
It sounds like a rehab, right? Drug rehab center, that's what they call it. Nobody said they would be treated as a prisoner.
Simon says he wasn't an addict, but might have been tempted to become one during his time in DRC.
Because inside there, right, you're able to meet people with contacts. Like you have your suppliers, everything, your runners, yeah, the whole thing, right? You get even more like into the whole scene. It's very difficult to stop that kind of cycle because you have even more context now. It's more available to you, you know?
The strategy that they taught us was just complete avoidance. Just like, don't go back to any of the places that you went to before. Just cut yourself off from everyone that you knew before, and that'll fix everything. And I mean, it's just not realistic.
You don't know what the officers will do to you. There's a fear of even speaking out. But let's say over the years, then I do see slight improvement. Like there's more counseling programs, there's more activities for inmates, there's more sort of welfare. Yeah. But I don't think it's enough.
Dr. Munidasa Winslow is an expert in addiction and impulse control disorders.
Given principles and a desire to do the right thing by science and all that in Singapore, we should be the best at helping people with recovery. We should be the best in the world.
What time is my next patient?
But there are certain impediments at the moment to getting well. We have basically said, stop using, stay in prison or DRC or jail long enough, and then go out, get a job, and then you'll be all well.
Dr. Winslow prefers a gentler approach to rehabilitation, but it's an option that is still largely unavailable to those who cannot afford to pay.
The people who are rich can access treatment programs that provide a lot more care, but people who do not have resources then are stuck. The person who is going to cane you or going to catch you or put you into an incarceration context, you're unlikely to seek help from. You need to separate out those services.
Sharifa Syed Zin remembers her brother's struggle with drug addiction.
I think maybe it all started after our mother passed away. He was 16, I was 18. So I think it was too soon for her to go. It's his own way of maybe internally trying to get over the grief. Maybe had it been that when he was in DRC, he was given the help that he needed to kill the habit, then maybe he wouldn't be in this predicament right now, you know.
Syed Suhail bin Syed Zin was handed the mandatory death penalty in 2015 for trafficking 38.84 grams of pure heroin. He said the drugs were for personal consumption, but judges were not convinced. Syed was scheduled to hang in February 2020, but he has had 2 stays of execution because of applications made by M. Ravi.
Syed Suhail had a serious addiction problem. Drug addiction is an illness, that's what the psychiatrists are saying. It's a mental illness, it's a mental condition. So they have to be treated, not killed.
Sharifa is hoping for the best for her brother. She's also started speaking up for the dozens of other drug offenders on death row with him.
We don't know when we're going to go, so the idea that the government can decide when you're going to go is so unacceptable that they think they can play God. Yeah.
With more executions expected soon, more Singaporeans will be confronting the issue of capital punishment and its role in their country. The conclusions they draw will be a reflection of what they value for themselves and their society.
We have to step back from our personal views and respect the community's views. The majority of Singaporeans feel that this is their country, it's a safe place. If it ain't broke, then don't fix it.
If we chopped off people's hands, would less people steal? Perhaps. Shall we do it? What kind of society do we want to be? What are we willing to live with? I don't believe that I'm safe in a society that is willing to kill. Right? That is what makes me feel unsafe.